I'm Josephine Bloodgood with Historic Huguenot Street, and I'm just trying to figure out what to do with this. I'm not going to move around, so I'm just going to set that there. I just want to say that I am a huge fan of Southeastern and love learning about all the amazing work you guys do. But I'm here today to talk a little bit about a project which has been grant funded, and I'll talk about how we kind of got to the point of getting the grants, and then Donna will take over after that and tell you sort of the nitty gritty about the project. And I should say this project would not be possible without Southeastern for sure. Okay, so for those of you who don't know us, Historic Huguenot Street is a 10-acre National Historic Landmark District here in New Paltz. So if you have time, you can take a drive and cruise the street this afternoon. Most of our stone houses date from the early 1700s. We also have a reproduction stone church, and if you look at the bottom left, you can see our replica Esopus wigwam. In addition to a large collection of historic furnishings and decorative arts, we have a very important collection of archival documents going back to the 1600s. Essential to our mission is telling a more inclusive story and revealing the interactions of not just the white European settlers, but of the Esopus, the local indigenous people, and the people of African descent who were enslaved by the French and Dutch settlers, as well as their descendants. After I joined the staff at Historic Huguenot Street, now almost 10 years ago, I began to delve into these amazing stories. And I soon learned that the HHS archives alone were not enough, that there was a fuller story within the collections of some other institutions in town. So HHS also preserves and provides access to the town of New Paltz, New Paltz's earliest documents, and works closely with the Reformed Church of New Paltz to preserve their records as well. We also have a long-standing collaborative relation with the Haviland-Heidgerd Historical Collection at the Elting Memorial Library. These 4 collections, containing countless overlapping references to people, places, and events. Just realized, why am I not wearing my glasses? With early documents in French and Dutch, as well as English, illuminate the development of a rural American community as it evolved over time, and demonstrate the power of local history to deepen understanding of broad historical trends. So one example, but a very good one, of how these collections intersect is the exhibit we did on Jane Dio Winecoop a few years ago. Jane was a woman born into slavery in New Paltz, and who later became one of the earliest Black individuals in town to buy land. Her name appears in the collections of each of our partner institutions. So first on top, we have Jane's birth record that appears in the town's Register of Slaves. Then we have her marriage record from 1827 in the records of the Reformed Church. And last, we have Jane's death, which was recorded by a friend in a journal in the Haviland-Heidgerd collection. While portions of each of these collections have been digitized in the past and added to HRVH, now New York Heritage, over the years, it was time to take a more comprehensive approach that would help us uncover and interpret more stories, while also ensuring the safe handling of the documents during the digitization process. We turned to the NEH, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and applied for a planning grant to get us started. Happily, the planning grant application was successful. It called for a team of scholars to evaluate and prioritize documents in terms of significance. And you can see David Voorhees and Firth Fobbin on the right there. It also called for a team of conservators to review the collections for condition and make recommendations for how they would be safely digitized. And that's Chloe Hausman, one of the conservators with the Conservation Center in Philadelphia. Planning also included working with Jen here at Southeastern to advise on how implementation would proceed and what was needed in terms of staffing and technology to make the collections available online. With the successful planning grant behind us, we went for a 3-year grant to conserve as needed and digitize over 3,400 documents, totaling over 24,000 pages. We focused this project on the earliest documents starting in the mid-1600s through around 1830. Again, our application was successful, and we were able to hire Donna as our digital librarian and project manager. Donna will talk to you more about her role in a few minutes, but I just have to say we were incredibly fortunate to hire Donna and to have her manage the project. So that was a real key thing. For the conservation and imaging work, we contracted with the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts in Philadelphia, and this was just the best option for us to ensure both the quality of the images and the safe handling of the documents. As part of the project, we formed an advisory committee consisting primarily of well-known scholars of early American history with an emphasis on Dutch and French colonization in New York, but also other stakeholders, including a community and programming professional and a tribal preservation officer for the Stockbridge-Munsee community. Also, we worked again with Jen to create the landing page of New York Heritage, which Donna will talk more about, and many other things. Jen's been a huge resource, and as I indicated, Southeastern has been extremely supportive and an essential partner through this entire endeavor. To help promote the New Paltz Historic Documents Project, we've created a standalone website using Omeka, thanks to Southeastern, which is available through the URL newpaltzhistory.org. The website, which is live but currently under construction, includes tips on how to search on New York Heritage, and will soon have a list of key topics to explore. The website lists partners and their websites, as well as our advisors. It also provides access to virtual programs that we've already held related to the documents, and highlights some of the research that's been done or is in progress. And in these 3 years of the project, so much has come about that wasn't necessarily expected, or at least not in this time frame. We received funding from the Dutch consulate for the translation of nearly 200 pages of documents from Dutch to English, and we're currently working on funding for French documents as well. We worked with the Northeast Slavery Records Index to link dozens of records. Actually, I think it's more like 93. Yeah. Several dozen, revealing the lives of enslaved individuals and linking those to their database. Beth, our archivist and librarian, and Donna did a presentation about the project for the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society. And they were also invited to submit an article by the New York State Archives Partnership Trust for their magazine, New York Archives. And we're taking part in a pilot project connecting finding aids to digitize collections being organized by University of Albany Libraries and Southeastern. And of course, importantly, the project has already led to enhanced research for both HHS staff working on exhibits and tours, but also for academic and general audiences. Phase 1 of the project will be wrapped up by the end of the grant period this May. So yes, about 6 weeks. And everything has gone so well And the digitized documents are such an amazing resource that we decided last year to go for a phase 2 implementation grant. Another 3 years of NEH funding would enable us to complete the project and include documents from all 4 collections once again, and dating this time from the 18th century through most of the 19th century. The announcements of the awards is due any day, but we're extremely optimistic. And so now it's my pleasure to hand it over to Donna.
Okay, thank you, Josephine. All right, I've been very busy, so I have some very busy slides to share. And I'm going to focus my talk on the implementation process. Oh, it's my force field. Oh, there, okay. So I'm going to talk about implementation. As Josephine mentioned, it's a 3-year project, and it's divided into 7 groups that I'm working on over 3 years, again, winding up at the end of May. Those 7 groups comprise about 2,500 to 4,000 pages per group, and we balanced the HHS documents with our partner collections. So the partner collections were sent in separate batches so that nothing got inadvertently going into the wrong batches. I transported them, so going sort of clockwise from the top left, that is our our replica church, and the archives are in the basement. So it's a really kind of a trip through history to go and work in the archives, because I walk through the burying ground where many of the people whose papers I'm dealing with are buried. So it's pretty solemn. The archives is the next picture in the group. Then a group of documents in the back of my car getting ready to go to CCAHA. And that was, again, 7 groups over the 3 years. They deliver those images back to us on hard drives in JPEG, TIFF, and PDF format. They also include documentary photographs showing some of the treatment, the conservation treatment that's done to selected documents. I record preliminary metadata in Excel. I bring it into Content DM, and I upload it to NYH. Super simple, right, Jen? I have to say, I used to sell Content DM, and that was one of my big selling points to try and get this job, which I'm delighted to be doing. And it was always with a sense of wistfulness that I would go out and demonstrate it and sell it. I sold it into libraries in New York. I worked representing OCLC for NILINC, which was the statewide consortium way back when. And my whist is gone now, because I don't just get to demonstrate, I actually get to have my own projects and work hands-on with it. And I can't believe I still know people at OCLC in support, and they've been wonderful, as Jen has as well, with training and learning curve support and just holding my hand so many times. We also were able to provide some input to OCLC for the Content DM reboot that they're working on. I'd like to see some changes to how translations are displayed and how transcript and translation text formatting is done. I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to the Dutch documents. I'd love to see to at least have an option for subject headings, personal names, and source fields to be displayed alphabetically versus how they're displayed now in New York Heritage, which is by how many of each thing there are. So the biggest group of documents, of types of documents in the project, are receipts. And yes, they're important, although I did start to think I was on a very special episode of Hoarders when I started looking at all these receipts. But it was a credit-based economy, as it still is, so that hasn't changed much either. The software hasn't changed much, but I'm really hoping that they'll be able to implement some of the suggestions that I put forth. And they know me, so it kind of helps. Josephine mentioned the translation of Dutch documents. Again, 200 plus pages of new or updated translations are in the project. And this was headed up by one of our scholarly advisors and one of the preeminent scholars in the world with Old Dutch, Dr. Jaap Jacobs, with his colleague Julie Vandenhout. And Jaap had the wonderful idea. I cautioned them at first. I said, we're not going to be able to do a lot with the formatting in the translation field in New York Heritage. And they said, yep, okay, we understand. So they very kindly provided me with a plain text Word document that I could paste in and make that all full text searchable. And these beautiful PDFs. And I'm like, what am I going to do with these? Because I can't, how are we going to do this? And so we had a Zoom call, And Yap suggested, and I heartily agreed, that wouldn't it be great if we could show them side by side? So I have some basic Photoshop skills with image processing, but I'm not an expert by any means. But looking at YouTube videos and doing some research, I figured out how to knit the two together, and they are presented side by side in New York Heritage. I wish the spacing was a little bit different, and if I had it to do over, and if I'd known we were going to do this, I would have had them do it a little bit differently, but I think it plays quite well. And Yap and Julie are very happy with it. For metadata, that's the biggest part of my job, really, is creating metadata for these documents. And one of the things that we grappled with early on was some of the subject headings in Library of Congress subject headings are outdated, particularly dealing with enslaved persons and with Native Americans. And we said, well, do we wait? We knew Library of Congress was working on it, and there was a lot of discussion in the academic community and library community about how do we do this? And there were some institutions that just went ahead and updated them and said, Library of Congress, you catch up with us. But we kept an eye on it, and as soon as Library of Congress started releasing some updated subject headings, and they started with enslaved persons as the major heading, they're getting to the subheadings, we implemented those headings in our instance as well, with input from our scholarly advisory committee, who have given us a lot of really valuable input as to metadata, and particularly descriptive of persons. We also decided to place a content note on our landing page that talks about how we did the metadata, that there may be language that people may find upsetting. We do our best to use the original language that the writers of these documents used to describe the people in them, and particularly with enslaved persons and with Indigenous persons, and always put that in quotes so that it's very clear that this is not how we're describing them. This is how they were described by the people who created these documents, and they are a product of their time. In description, I really try and balance archival neutrality with making sure that we expose things that might be missed or that might be heretofore just not surfaced really in how we described them. And I do use I used to work in publishing, so I use a lot of pull quotes to kind of pique interest in the content, in the metadata, and in how it's displayed when you land on it in New York Heritage. Genealogy is a big part of what I'm using to help describe the documents. I was not a big genealogy person when I started. I've learned a lot in the last 3 years. It's been fascinating. I have at my disposal at the library at Huguenot Street a lot of published genealogies, but these are exclusively for the Walloon and Dutch and English families. There are not published genealogies going back that far, of course, for enslaved people or for Indigenous, because their names were not recorded in the vast majority of records. So there's that to grapple with. There were multiple individuals with the same name active at the same time. Everybody seemed to be named Abraham or Cornelius or Roloff. And there's a bunch of Abraham Deos who were all alive at the same time and were all doing stuff at the same time and signing documents. And with 24,000 pages, I couldn't really, I can't, sometimes I do if I just can't help myself, but to compare signatures and go, okay, this Abraham, sometimes I wish I had a whiteboard with everybody's signatures, like, crime scene or something. So there's that. With married women, we've chosen to name them in the personal name field with their married name, first name, birth, surname. This is not always common practice. It helps knit together and show the relationships between the families. The only time, and that's if I have the information. Also, if I can tell within a reasonable doubt that this was this Abraham versus that Abraham, I'll include the birth and death dates in the records. If I'm really not sure which Abraham Bevere it is, I'll use a generic Bevere Abraham in the record. We've really made a great emphasis on an effort to surface the names of enslaved men, women, and children, those names were usually, if the names were recorded at all, sometimes they were just my slave, my Negro. These are usually found in wills, in auctions, estate auctions usually, bills of sale, the overseers of the poor records, account books, and again, receipts for people, which has been, it's a cataloging challenge because you can get emotional, and it's, you know, again, it's a balance. And then tracing the names of Native Americans, usually those are only found in land agreements. And we've had a scholar working with us, J. Michael Smith, who's traced to the names of a lot of the local Esopus sachems and some of the other people in the community through land agreements and through many, many other documents that those names appear in outside of the historic Huguenot Street collections. Social media, I never had to write social media posts before other than my own little Facebook posts of my dog. But a part of my job is, this project is part of the weekly rotation of posts from the curatorial department. And this again has helped us establish and tell some new stories by these new pathways being made between materials through the metadata that we're creating. And it gives us an opportunity to expand beyond the basic description that we find in New York Heritage to create these little mini exhibits. And this example is from a commonplace book from the 1830s, and it's a young family, the Van Wagenen family. One of their children died very young. This was not uncommon, unfortunately, and she wrote beautiful poetry about her deceased daughter, and that's actually the daughter's gravestone in the Huguenot Street burying ground. So it's been a really intense personal connection to some of these people through these documents. And then I'm very fortunate to have some privileges of time and space in the work that I'm doing. Although something you can say, oh, it's a product of its time. It's you know, was written by people who had different worldviews, which is certainly true. It doesn't preclude me as a librarian and as a information professional having strong reactions to things. And this particular one, Beth will tell you, I literally gasped when I read it because it's a letter that was written, it's actually from 1868, so it's outside the scope of the project, but it's part of a folder, so we don't leave things out. And it's a young woman who was born in New Paltz, lived here until she was, I think, 31 years of age, and she married her high school sweetheart, Solomon Hasbrook, and they moved to Boise. And so it's a really interesting letter that she wrote to a friend back home about her journey from New York going across the Isthmus of Panama overland before the Panama Canal was built, and then taking a steamer up to San Francisco, and then going the Humboldt route, it was called, to Idaho. And then arriving in Idaho, she starts to write about Native Americans in an incredibly upsetting way. I'll just say it. And I just went, oh, what do I do with this? And part of what do I do with this is a typewritten transcript. It's not an original document. Do we include it? And so I went back to Josephine and Beth to discuss it. And what are we going to write about this? So I drafted some language, sent it to Beth and Josephine, and we agreed, on how we were going to handle it. But I'm lucky that I am in a position that I can step away at times like this and go, okay, I'm going to work on something else now and just let this marinate, or I'm going to seek, consultation from my colleagues as to how to best handle it. And, and not everybody has the opportunity to step away from what they're doing and go work on something else when they need to. So that's been something that surprised me about this project. So I think I'm ending right on time. Yay. So this is one of my favorite maps because it shows there are references to enslaved people on this map. It's land that was originally indigenous land that was through the land agreement that was made with the settlers became what is now New Paltz. And so, everyone is represented here and certainly views that all of these people would have experienced over the course of their lives. So I really love this map. So please do explore. We're always really super open to feedback and suggestions. And if you find a mistake, please let me know. If you find something that you think could have been handled differently or you would like to inquire about, please get in touch with me. And do visit the new website, newpaltzhistory.org. And that's all I have. Thanks. Do we have time for questions? Do we have questions in the chat?
What did we learn earlier? What
questions do you have? I'm sure there are many. I have questions. No? Okay. Well, thank you.